Rome, September 16, 1982. Roberto Calvi's body hangs among Blackfriars in London. In his pockets, a macabre detail, bricks and $14,000. A suicide, they say. But the shadows surrounding this incident tell a different story, a story written in blood on the streets of Rome. Welcome to Dark Souls. I'm Alex Neri. Today I will take you into the dark heart of the Italian capital, where for almost 20 years a group of young men, raising in the working-class suburbs, wrote the most violent and mysterious chapter of Roman organized crime, the Magliana Gang. Rome is ours and we're taking it. These are the words of Freddo, known as Lebanon, as he planned the rise of what would become the most powerful and widespread criminal organization in the history of Rome, an organization that, from the working-class Magliana neighborhood, extended its tentacles to the Vatican, the secret services, and the halls of power. Not just street criminals, but architects of an empire founded on blood, fear, and connivance at the highest levels. An empire whose secrets remain buried even today, along with its countless victims. Rome, 1970s, a divided city, suspended between the economic miracle and the years of lead. The suburbs seethe with social unrest, while the city center flaunts its opulence. It is in this scenario of profound contradictions that the Magliana Gang was born, a criminal organization destined to rewrite the rules of Roman underworld. Before the gang, Rome had no real organized crime structure. Crime was fragmented into small neighborhood gangs, each with its own territory and its own illicit activities: robbery, extortion, gambling, crimes that remained confined to their respective neighborhoods without a broader agenda. Everything changed in 1975, when some criminals from Rome's suburbs began meeting at the Fermi bar in the Magliana neighborhood. Here, Freddo, Lebanon, has a vision: to join forces to control the entire city. In Milan, Naples, and Sicily, they've figured out how to do it. In Rome, we're still groping in the dark. The decisive moment comes in November 1977 with the kidnapping of Duke Massimiliano Grazioli, Lant della Rovere. An operation that netted 1.5 billion lire, an astronomical sum for the time. That money becomes the gang's starting capital, the seed of a criminal empire. But it's not just money that fuels the gang's rise. These are the years when heroin floods the streets of Rome, creating a huge and uncontrolled market, while the state is distracted by the fight against political terrorism. These kids from the suburbs sense an opportunity to fill a power vacuum. The political context plays a crucial role. Italy is paralyzed by Cold War tensions, torn between American influence and the largest communist party in the West. Institutions are fragile, infiltrated, sometimes complicit. The Magliana Gang will exploit these weaknesses with a skill no one could have predicted. They aren't sophisticated criminals at first. They are children of the working-class neighborhoods who grew up amid poverty and violence. Enrico Renatino de Pitas, Maurizio Abatino il Freddo, Nicolino Sardo Celis, Marcello Marcellone Calfigli, names that will become legends in the crime reports. They speak a thick Roman dialect, they aren't educated, but they possess a fierce street smarts. "We're not like those before," said Lebanon. "We don't ask anyone's permission. Rome is ours and we'll take it." A simple philosophy that will mark the beginning of an era of blood and power unprecedented in the criminal history of the capital. Behind every large criminal organization are figures whose charisma and brutality define its essence. The Magliana Gang is no exception. 3 men, above all, shaped its destiny: Franco Giuseppe, Maurizio Abatino, and Enrico de Pitas, known respectively as Lebanon, Cold, and Dandi. 3 distinct personalities who, like pieces of a perverse mosaic, fit together perfectly. Franco Giuseppe, the Lebanon, was the visionary, the architect. Born in Testaccio in 1947, he grew up among petty thefts and street fights. He was tall, robust, with a rough charm and the eloquence typical of working-class Romans. He was able to switch from the most rigorous dialect to an almost formal Italian when necessary. This ability to communicate with people from all walks of life proved fundamental. Rome is like a cake, he often repeated to his family, and they must have their slice. It was his intuition to divide the city into zones of influence, while maintaining central coordination. He also came up with the principle of the common treasury, revolutionary for the time. The major profits were shared, thus creating a sense of belonging and loyalty never before seen in the Roman underworld. Lebanon was magnetic, almost fatherly with his men, ruthless with his enemies. A former police officer who knew him well said, "Giuspacci looked you in the eye when he spoke, he never lowered his gaze, and you knew he wasn't bluffing, that he would do exactly what he said." Next to him was Maurizio Abatino, the cold-eyed, born in Trastevere in 1954, who was the temperamental opposite of Libano, calculating, thoughtful, methodical. If Giuseppe was the beating heart of the gang, Abatino was its analytical brain. Thin, always, dressed carefully, but without ostentation. He spoke little and listened a lot. "You shouldn't provoke the cold," recalls a former member who became a collaborator with Justice. He could wait months, even years, but if he decided you had to pay, you paid. He never shouted, and this made him even more unsettling. It was in Batino that he structured the gang's most complex operations, from kidnappings to major drug trafficking. He organized the network of informants in the police and judiciary, and it was he who, years later, became one of the most crucial informants in the investigations into the gang. The third point of this criminal triangle was Enrico Renatino, de Pedis, nicknamed the Dandi. Born in 1954 in Garbatella, de Pedis represented an evolution of the street criminal. Elegant, charming, a lover of luxury and beautiful women, he seemed to have stepped out of an American movie rather than the Roman suburbs. The dandy was different, say those who knew him. While others still walked around in jeans and jackets, he wore tailored suits and frequented the clubs in the city center. He understood before anyone else that to truly control Rome, you had to get into the good places, not stay out of them. The Pedis was the first to grasp the potential of reinvesting in legal businesses, restaurants, boutiques, and real estate companies. It was he who forged relationships with the Roman upper middle class, with the Vatican finance, with deviant elements of the institutions, and it was he who survived the longest, transforming himself from bandit to entrepreneur until his assassination in 1990. 3 men, 3 different ways of conceiving criminal power, together, were unstoppable. Lebanon with his vision and brutal charisma, the cold one with his strategic mind and cold determination, the dandy with his ability to move between worlds, to connect the streets with the halls of power. Their ferocity manifested itself in different ways. Giuseppe was capable of tremendous outbursts of violence. It is said that once in a Trastevere bar he shot in the legs a man who had dared to contradict him, then offered him a beer while he was bleeding and smiling. That's how you learn to know when it's time to keep quiet. Abatino was methodical even in his violence. He planned every murder down to the smallest detail. He studied his victims' habits for weeks. "It's not personal," he once told a man, before killing him. "You're just on the wrong side." De Pedis, on the other hand, often delegated physical violence, preferring to exercise a more subtle power. "The most effective threats are the ones you don't even have to utter," he used to say. He knew that a smile accompanied by the right reputation could be more intimidating than any weapon. Rome didn't fall into the hands of the Magliana Gang overnight, but when it did, the grip was total and suffocating. Neighborhood after neighborhood, street after street, the gang spread its tentacles across the capital like an invisible but lethal spiderweb. By the early 1980s, the organization had already methodically divided the city into zones of influence. From the historic center to the suburbs, nothing escaped their control. Their expansion strategy was as simple as it was brutal. First, they identified the profitable businesses in a neighborhood, then presented themselves with an offer that couldn't be refused. "It's not a request, it's a notice," was the phrase uttered by one of the men from Lebanon to the owner of an arcade. "In Testacho. Starting tomorrow, 50% is ours. If you prefer, we can take over the whole place. You decide how much you want to suffer." The extortion system was widespread and well organized. Restaurants, bars, garages, shops. Everyone paid the protection money with almost mathematical regularity. Anyone who tried to rebel received a warning first, often an arson attack or a smashed window. With the second refusal, the violence became personal. With the third, there was no one left who could refuse. Gambling was the first major source of income. The gang controlled clandestine gambling dens in every area of the city, from the most elegant ones frequented by the Roman upper class to the most squalid ones in the basements of the suburbs. The beauty of gambling, the Cold often said, is that the customers always come back, even when they lose everything, especially when they lose everything. A turnover estimated at billions of lire that generated a flow of constant money, perfect for financing expansion into other sectors. And when a player couldn't pay his debts, he got involved in other activities. Drug transportation, fronting for rental companies, even acting as an informant within government institutions. But it was drug trafficking that definitively cemented the gang's power. As the demand for heroin exploded in Italian cities, the Magliana Gang found itself in the ideal position to manage its large-scale distribution. Thanks to their contacts with the Sicilian Mafia and the Neapolitan Camorra, they managed to create a solid and constant supply network. "Rome is a perfect market," Dandi explained to his men. "We have kids from the suburbs who want it cheap and rich kids who can pay a fortune for it. We can sell the same stuff at different prices in different neighborhoods, and no one can compete with us." Distribution was organized militarily. Each neighborhood had its own manager. Every leader, their pushers, every pusher, their drug-dealing locations. Nothing was left to chance. Nothing escaped central control. Money flowed upward, drugs downward. The consolidation of territorial power inevitably occurred through a series of strategic assassinations. These were not simple settling of scores between criminals, but real executions aimed at eliminating competition and instilling terror. On September 13, 1980, Nicolino Celis, the boss of the Magliana district, who had challenged the group's authority, was lured to a garage. Under the pretext of discussing a deal, 6 gunshots ended his life and any desire for independence in his neighborhood. The message was clear. There was no longer any room for other organizations in Rome. The murder of Franco Nicolini, known as Francino Criminal, was particularly brutal. He was killed on July 25, 1981. After kidnapping him, they tortured him for hours before finishing him off with 3 shots to the head. His body was found semi-charred in a landfill on the eastern outskirts. It wasn't just an execution, it was a public display of power, but the real leap in quality came when the gang began targeting not only other criminals, but also officials of the institutions who tried to hinder them. Magistrates were intimidated, police officers were corrupted, journalists were threatened. Rome's system seemed to buckle before their unstoppable advance. In just a few years, what had begun as a neighborhood gang had transformed into the most powerful criminal organization in the capital, with a business that touched every sector of the city's economy. From the streets they had reached the halls of power, from neighborhood rackets to the control of entire economic sectors, and this was just the beginning. The worst, or the best, depending on your perspective, was yet to come. Behind the Vatican walls, amidst frescoed corridors and majestic domes, lay perhaps the most surprising of the Magliana Gang's alliances. Their alliance with the ecclesiastical authorities, particularly with the IOR, the Institute for the Works of Religion, commonly known as the Vatican Bank. This connection arose almost by chance in the early 1980s, when the gang already had solid territorial control of Rome but was looking for safe channels to launder the enormous flow of money from drug trafficking and extortion. It was Enrico de Pitas, known as the Dandi, who first recognized the potential of this alliance. "Priests have something we lack, respectability," he once said to one of his most important figures. "And we have what they need, with so many who don't ask questions." The intermediary for this sacrilegious union was Monsignor Paul Marcinus, the powerful president of the IOR from 1971 to 1989. An American of Lithuanian origins, Marcinus was an imposing man, almost 2 meters tall. Nicknamed the Gorilla not only for his size, but also for the unorthodox methods with which he managed the Vatican finances. His philosophy was simple and cynical. The Church cannot be governed by Hail Marys alone. The scheme was as simple as it was effective. The gang delivered suitcases full of cash that were deposited in the IOR's accounts. These funds, protected by Vatican secrecy and immune from any control by the Italian judiciary, were then transferred to foreign accounts, laundered through a series of complex financial transactions, and finally reinvested in assets. Legitimate businesses, real estate, restaurants, luxury hotels, even construction companies that received public contracts. A member of the gang who turned informer, Antonino Mancini, revealed, "Years later, we brought the money to the Vatican in ordinary shopping bags. No checks, no questions asked. We entered through the side door, the one reserved for suppliers. In half an hour, millions of lire disappeared into thin air, only to reappear as clean as holy water." It is estimated that this system was used to launder hundreds of billions of lire, with a commission for YOR that ranged between 15 and 20%. A win-win deal. The gang could launder the dirty money, while YOR received substantial commissions that did not appear in any official accounts. But the connection between crime and the Vatican was not limited to money laundering. There was a deeper and more disturbing level to this relationship that directly touched Italian politics and the strategy of tension during the years of lead. The Magliana Gang, through its contacts with Licio Gelli's P2 Masonic Lodge, became an operational tool of what some investigators called the entity, a hidden power that united deviant secret services, organized crime, sectors of Freemasonry, and ultra-conservative Vatican circles, all united in opposition to the advance of the Communist Party in Italy. Particularly disturbing was the relationship between the gang and Monsignor Luigi Celli, a prelate with ties to the Italian secret services who regularly frequented the notorious Magliana Gang. According to some testimonies, Celli acted as an intermediary for operations that went far beyond simple money laundering. The epitome of these dark connections was the apartment at number 96 Via Gradoli in Rome. A seemingly ordinary home that, according to several investigations, was a meeting point for gang members, secret agents, and even some prelates. The same apartment that, in a disturbing web of coincidences, was also linked to the investigation into the kidnapping of Aldo Moro. In Via Gradoli, things were decided that would change the history of Italy. Maurizio Abatino confessed years later, "The cold. We were only the soldiers, but we understood that we were playing a game much bigger than ourselves." The protection guaranteed by these powerful allies allowed the gang to operate with almost total impunity. When some magistrates got too close to the truth, mysterious interventions from above blocked investigations. Files disappeared, witnesses recanted, evidence vanished. The murder of journalist Mino Pecorelli in 1979, who was investigating the links between the Vatican, P2, and organized crime, represented perhaps the most tragic moment of this unholy alliance. Pecorelli, editor of the magazine OP, Osservatorio Politico, was killed with 4 gunshots while in his car. Notes and documents concerning Iorshini's suspicious financial dealings were found in his pockets. This web of power, money, and blood would continue to protect the Magliana Gang until its decline, creating a corrupt system that would leave deep scars not only on the city of Rome, but on the entire democratic structure of Italy. Rome, June 22, 1983. An early summer day like many others. In the capital, Emanuela Orlandi, a 15-year-old Vatican citizen, daughter of a papal envoy, leaves the Tommaso Ludovico de Vittoria Music School in Piazza Sant'Apollinare. It's a few minutes before 7 p.m. She will never return home. What begins as the disappearance of a young girl will turn into one of the most disturbing mysteries of contemporary Italy. A case that, 40 years later, continues to reveal dark connections with the Magliana Gang, the Vatican, the secret services, and the strategy of tension. The first days after her disappearance seem to follow the script of a normal missing persons case. The family reports the incident. The search begins. But on July 5th, the first anonymous phone call arrives. "We have the girl. To get Emanuela back, you must release Mehmet Ali, the Turkish attacker who 2 years earlier shot Pope John Paul II. Thus began a series of communications, claims of responsibility, and false leads, transforming the case into a labyrinth of red herrings. The intervention of what the media would call the American, a mysterious interlocutor with a foreign accent, added further confusion. But behind this smokescreen, the most astute investigators began to glimpse the shadow of the Magliana Gang. The kidnapping of Orlandi was a coded message for the Vatican, as Antonio Mancini, a penitent, declared years later. It was a warning to recover the money the gang had entrusted at the time through Monsignor Marcinus and which was not being returned. According to this reconstruction, the Magliana Gang had invested billions through thanks to the mediation of Enrico de Pitis, known as the Dandi. When the Vatican refused to return the money, Emanuela's kidnapping served as a warning. Strengthening this hypothesis was the testimony of Sabrina Minardi, de Pitis's former partner, who shocked investigators in 2008. Accompanied Enrico when he was carrying the girl after the kidnapping. "I saw her, it was Emanuela Orlandi, then they killed her. I also saw a prelate involved, then. His name was Don Renatino." Laminardi precisely described how the girl had been held prisoner in an apartment near Piazza San Giovanni di Dio, then in a house in Torvianica before her alleged elimination. He also claimed that the body had been hidden in a cement mixer near Tormarancia. Making this story even more disturbing was the discovery in 2012 of an anomalous tomb in the Vatican grottos of the Basilica of Sant'Apollinare. Enrico de Pitis, killed in 1990, was buried there by special concession. A criminal buried in a papal basilica, a privilege reserved for cardinals and nobles. Why had the Church granted such an honor to a Roman criminal boss? Marco Exetti, a photographer who accused himself of involvement in the kidnapping, claimed that Emanuela was kidnapped to obtain the return of a large loan the Vatican had made to the gang, and that de Pitis' burial in the basilica was a way to blackmail the Holy See. The investigation into the Orlandi case has been plagued by misdirection, silence, and reticence. Many key witnesses have died under mysterious circumstances. Important documents have disappeared or been manipulated. The truth seems to be increasingly engulfed in a maze of secrets and lies. After 40 years, the Orlandi case remains an open wound in Italian history, a symbol of the gray area where crime, power, and institutions intertwine. A disturbing reminder of the difficulty of shedding light on some of our country's darkest mysteries. For those who want to delve deeper into this intricate case, we recently published a comprehensive investigation on our YouTube channel. We invite you to watch the video to discover all the details and the latest revelations about the kidnapping of Emanuela Orlandi. London, June 18, 1982. A city employee, on his way to work, notices something strange under the Blackfriars Bridge, over the Thames. Approaching, he discovers a man hanging from one of the arches. It is Roberto Calvi, president of Banco Ambrosiano, one of the most powerful banks in Italy. His body sways slowly, his hands tied behind his back, his feet touching the water. In his pockets, bricks, and an unusual sum of money. $0,000 in cash. A suicide, the British authorities hastily conclude. But from the start, too many things don't add up. Why would a man who controlled a financial empire take his own life in such a macabre way? Why the bricks in his pockets? Why that strange sum of money? The truth, as often happens in this story, has its roots in the shadowy ties between the Magliana Gang and Italy's financial and political power. Roberto Calvi was a key figure in the gang's money laundering system. The illicit proceeds from drug trafficking, extortion, and gambling were laundered through Banco Ambrosiano, of which he was president. But Calvi wasn't just a banker. He was also an influential member of Licio Gelli's P2 Lodge, the secret Masonic lodge that aimed to influence Italian politics. ELOIA, the Vatican Bank, was a major shareholder of the Banco Ambrosiano. This perverse web of interests made Calvi a troublesome figure, a man who knew too much and could be eliminated to protect unspeakable secrets. According to several witnesses, the Magliana Gang was charged with carrying out the murder. Enrico de Pitas, the Dandi, arranged Calvi's transfer to London and his execution. Calvi had to pay, declared years later. Maurizio Abatino, the Cold. He had made too much of the gang's money disappear, and Gelli wanted to kill him because he was a burden to P2. The crime scene had been staged to simulate a suicide, but investigators found too many inconsistencies. The rope around Calvi's neck was too short to allow him to hang himself. His shoes were clean, despite having had to walk across a construction site to reach the bridge, and the bricks in his pockets seemed like a macabre warning. It was a proper execution, concluded the coroner who performed the autopsy. A clear and unmistakable message. But who had sent that message and why? The answer perhaps lies buried in the depths of Italian history, in that tangle of power, money, and blood that characterized the years of lead. The Magliana Gang wasn't just a criminal organization dedicated to profit. At certain points in its history, it became an operational tool of what is known as the strategy of tension, a subversive plan aimed at destabilizing Italy and preventing the rise of the Communist Party to government. This involvement occurred through the gang's ties to deviant secret services, neo-fascist circles, and once again Licio Gelli's P2 Lodge. Some members of the gang, particularly Massimo Carminati, known as Il Cicado, were recruited by the secret services to carry out violent and intimidating actions. One of the most disturbing operations was the discovery in 1981 of an arsenal of explosive weapons in the Ministry of Health. According to investigations, the material had been hidden there by Carminati and other gang members to be used in terrorist attacks. To create chaos, a repentant confessed years later. To make people understand that the state was unable to protect them. This would have led to them demanding a strong government, perhaps a coup d'état. The gang's involvement in the Bologna train station massacre on August 2, 1980, is still debated today. Some witnesses have identified gang members among the perpetrators of the attack, while others maintain that their role was limited to providing logistical support. What is certain is that the gang had direct contact with the black terrorists and the hidden masterminds of the massacre. But the darkest chapter of this collaboration was perhaps the kidnapping of Aldo Moro in 1978. According to some reconstructions, the Magliana Gang provided logistical support to the Red Brigades, managing the hideouts and transporting the prisoner. "We were the ghosts of Rome," Bettino once said. "We moved in the shadows, doing the dirty work for others. We were invisible, but we controlled everything." This involvement in the strategy of tension marked a turning point in the gang's history. The simple criminal organization transformed into an instrument of power in the hands of dark forces aiming to destabilize the country. A pact with the devil that would leave deep scars on Italian society. The story of the Magliana Gang, like that of any empire built on blood and power, could not last forever. Beginning in the mid-1980s, the cracks began to become increasingly evident. Internal struggles for control of territory, shadowy betrayals, and ruthless feuds between the different groups that once composed a single ferocious war machine irreparably undermined the organization's cohesion and effectiveness. Power, it is said, corrupts, and in the Magliana Gang, it did so brutally. Greed and paranoia replaced loyalty and discipline. The leaders, once united by a blood pact, began to view each other with suspicion, ready to stab each other in the back for a larger share of the spoils. The violent deaths of some of the historic leaders, charismatic and ruthless figures such as Franco Giuseppuzzi and Enrico de Pitas, left a leadership vacuum that no one was able to fill. No one had the same charisma as Lebanon, the same cold intelligence as the cold, the same ability to weave relationships as the Dandi. In their place, smaller, meaner figures emerged, more inclined to gratuitous violence and revenge. But it wasn't just self-destruction that sealed the fate of the gang. The state, after years of silence and complicity, began to react. The investigations of courageous magistrates, the increasingly targeted and incisive police operations, the seizures of assets that struck at the heart of the gang's economic interests, the countless arrests that decimated the ranks of the organization. All this contributed to crumbling the myth of invincibility that the gang had built for itself. 1992, the year of the arrest of Enrico de Pitas, the Dandi, symbolically represented the point of no return. With his fall, an era definitively ended. The Magliana Gang, as a structured and omnipotent criminal organization, ceased to exist. But here lies the paradox, the most disturbing aspect of this story. While the Magliana Gang has been dismantled, its legacy continues to weigh heavily on the city of Rome. The collusion between crime, politics, finance, and even deviant sectors of the institutions, collusion that the gang helped create and consolidate, has not completely disappeared. It has changed, transformed, but continues to pollute the social and political fabric of the capital. And then there is the myth, the long shadow that the gang still casts on the collective imagination today. Films, television series, and novels romanticize their exploits, almost turning them into negative heroes, corrupt Robin Hoods, kings of Rome. A morbid attraction, a fascination with evil that seems never to fade. Rome thus lives a stark contradiction. On the one hand, she struggles to free herself from the gang's criminal legacy, its violence, its trafficking, its connivances. On the other, she continues to be somehow seduced by it, fascinated by that dark and transgressive power that marked an era. Perhaps because the story of the Magliana Gang is not just the story of a criminal organization, it is a distorting but faithful mirror of